everyone. I'm Sarah. I work for Wild Welfare and I am the animal welfare field manager. And today we've got Kyle with us, who is an incredible collaborator with some of our resources. So, Kyle, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name is Kyle Banton-Jones. I run Wild Enrichment and the Wild Enrichment podcast. Very excited to be working with Wild Welfare again. This has been a fantastic collaboration on the Enrichment Roadmap. So really excited to talk a little bit about that and give some useful anecdotes and help people use it.
Well, I was thinking today, Kyle, how long it's been that we've been collaborating because I delved back into the archives and I think our first emails were in 2020. Do you remember how that
Mm,
all started?
I remember 2020 well.
We all do.
Weird, yeah, yeah. So the enrichment roadmap was sort of one of the first things that we collaborated on, I think, and it was a resource that I created to sort of almost like complement some of the ideas around, models like Spider, the Spider model of enrichment, those kind of things. So, with the ultimate goal of trying to, help keepers get the ideas from, living in their heads to, out to the animal, because, ideas aren't enriching. Only the enrichments that you're giving the animal can be enriching. So, that's with the ultimate goal there. And after having created the resource, we started working together, and Wild Welfare has taken it and run with it to places that I wasn't even couldn't even imagine at the time. So you'll have to give me the total as far as the translations that we're at right now, and the reach, because the reach that I was able to achieve and the reach that you were able to achieve are on completely different sort of hemispheres. So very excited to be able to collaborate on that.
Well, I think what was so exciting about it, and I remember thinking this when I first saw it, was that it has so much practical application. So we're taking those welfare theories that we all know and love, and we are saying, okay, this is actually what enrichment is truly about. Because back when I was a keeper, I always kind of thought of enrichment as, it's a secondary thing if you have time, and sometimes it can be a bit of a tick box exercise. And obviously, we don't want it to be that. We want it to be as important as our cleaning duties and our feeding duties and all those kinds of things. And I think back in my keeping days, it wasn't seen as that. So, are you noticing a bit of a change now, Kyle, and the way in which the roadmap is actually encouraging that change?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as you were just saying, um, I think we've all anybody who's been keeping in the last 10, 15 years has definitely seen this change happening, where you're starting with that sort of behavioral mindset, as opposed to applying that behavioral mindset to an existing sort of routine and an existing sort of husbandry protocol. So we're starting to see, like, how can we take care of these animals from their point of view, as opposed to, like what works for us. So I think that shift is, promoting things like enrichment and their behavioral welfare of a lot of these animals. And I think the enrichment roadmap is a way of keepers not only getting those ideas out of their head, but also sort of like managing these programs in the long term. I talk a lot about the difference between like stuff versus enrichment. Like, it's only enrichment if the animal finds it enriching. So when you have a structured sort of protocol like the enrichment roadmap, you're really able to make sure that these items are enriching over the long term, and keep these programs, enriching over the long term. So, yeah, it's definitely been a fantastic shift, particularly over the last 10 years. So, and I'm excited to see how it continues to go.
Well, here in the UK, it's actually just been made a legal requirement now to have behavioural goals attached to your enrichment. So that's been quite a big shift over here. So that's been very exciting. But yeah, so the enrichment roadmap itself, what gave you the initial idea to do it, Kyle, to create it in its beauty?
Yeah, it was. I was really trying to at the time, and I've definitely shifted Wild Enrichment a little bit more. Wild Enrichment definitely started as me creating enrichment items and posting them online. That's how the website started. And I shifted into writing articles, doing a podcast, all these kind of things later. But one of the things that keeps coming up, and anybody who has sort of put themselves out there online or put any sort of enrichment, if you've posted enrichment on any sort of platform, and people have seen it, they probably ask you like, how do you come up with these ideas? Like, what's your process, and all those kind of things. Or they'll ask you specifics for, do you have any good enrichment for this reptile, or do you have any good enrichment for, this specific animal? And, the answer to that is always kind of like, yeah, I could probably think of something, but, I don't know your individual animal. And it's more helpful if I can teach you the process in which you can come up with these ideas yourself, because the people that are caring for these animals are the people that know them best, and they're the people that are going to create the most effective enrichment. So giving them the tools to do that is, I think, more important than giving them sort of, hey, you should try this, hey, you should try that. I had writing a lot of articles at the time. I wanted to boil everything down into like an infographic that people can put on the wall of keeper room or whatever, and sort of continuously sort of go through that process. So that's what I did here. I sort of broke down my process and the things that I think are important when you're thinking about enrichment. And these are by no means, things that every time I sit down, this is like I'm doing, step 1 through 9 here and I'm checking a box. But this is sort of like how my mind is working, and the things that I think are very, very important to think about for individual items and sort of programs as a whole.
Well, you say it's up in, various keeper kitchens. It really is now up in various places around the world, which is great. So yeah, we have it currently available in 22 languages. I'm currently working
Wow.
on the 23rd. But yeah, what I love about it is that we use it in our training so much. When we are talking about anything to do with enrichment, we show everybody the roadmap. We usually have it translated into that target language as well. We print it out, we give it as gifts. People put it in their staff rooms, people are putting it in their feed areas, all sorts of places. I've seen it up in, the back of house of zoo in a desert. We've used it in training in an animal sanctuary in the middle of the Indonesian jungle. We've used it all sorts of places, and it's such a beloved resource, which is fantastic. So yeah, you kind of telling us that we were able to utilize it and then start translating it. It's really been a fantastic partnership. And every time I see it, I always try and get a photo to send to you, but it's used so much that I'd be spamming you with emails with these pictures. So yeah, I just send them occasionally, but it is so well loved and so well used. It's even being used here in the UK as well. There's lots of places that I know are using it as well, so it's a very, very popular resource.
Yeah, and that's all due to your efforts at Wild Welfare and that collaboration. Yeah, it's been absolutely amazing. I can't even name 23 languages, so the fact that it's now translated into that is absolutely amazing, and the fact that it's more places is humbling, and I definitely thank you guys for your efforts there. It's great.
Well, I think it's such a useful resource because, again, it's encouraging that thought process. As we said, it isn't just here's how to make an enrichment device, it is here's how to go through the entire process. And I think that's why so many people really connect with it because it is that step-by-step process. Should we start at kind of step one? Obviously, researching that natural history. So, one thing that we get asked a lot with wild welfare is where should people find that natural history information, essentially.
Yeah, that is a great point, and something that everybody who works with, especially animals other than very like charismatic megafauna. If you're not working with one of those animals, it can be very hard to find resources on that natural history, and sometimes that's just the way it is, like especially depending on how sort of obscure in quotations the animal that you're working with. I don't think there's a very reliable resource for everything out there. And I think it varies depending on where you're at in your enrichment program, and how sort of deep you're going to go, because I think the difference between you're starting an enrichment program and you're sort of just learning about an animal versus you have a very practiced and sort of seasoned program that you really want to progress, you want to see what's missing from the program. Those are going to be a little different. I think you're probably there's probably tons of resources on just getting a general idea of just figuring out what the animal is spending its time doing. And you want to find those, like the really important ones for me, especially when you're creating that sort of backbone of the program, are these sort of like highly motivated species specific behaviors. These are the things that even if the animal isn't spending a lot of time doing them in the day, they're very, very important to that animal. So it can be challenging to find those behaviors. And that's where you want to lean on like the scientific community, looking at papers and some of the literature out there. You might have to dig around in some obscure textbooks to find some of this information. But you can find a lot of really useful anecdotes, even online and with fellow keepers throughout this process. I think one of the most important things is to collaborate with other facilities, other zoos, other zookeepers. All these things are important. But yeah, finding those really highly motivated behaviors for a specific animal, because those are going to be reliable and repeatable and things that the animal is searching for opportunities to do. Because that's really what you want to frame here is like, you are providing them opportunities to do this behavior. You're not like, giving them things to that they might do this thing with. It's like you are giving them the opportunity to perform this behavior that they want to do. So that's really what you want to have your mind around, and that's really what you want to be looking for. But it can be tough depending on the animal you're looking for.
Definitely. And I think that word opportunity, I think I must say that about 50 times a day when I'm training. It's so much of, again, yeah, as you say, we're not saying, okay, here's something, you can do this with something. It is, here's an opportunity based on that goal behavior and based on that natural history. So this is, again, what I love about the roadmap. It takes you through it step by step. So can you give me an example then of one of those kind of really rewarding goal behaviors, maybe in one of the species that you work with?
Yeah, yeah. One of the most enduring and simple enrichment devices that I ever built was probably about 8 years ago, and I built a hanging barrel for a muskox at a facility that I used to work at, because muskox, one of their highly motivated behaviors, they live in herds. They constantly spar. They have, if you look at the horn structure of a muskox, they are made to hit things with their heads, for lack of a better word, and do these sparring behaviors. And hanging this barrel was a very sort of low hanging fruit. It was very easy to do. 8 years later, I still get videos of the muskox using the barrel every single morning, and they have for the last 8 years. And that's when we're talking about sort of a highly motivated species specific behavior, like that's what we're talking about. Like the muskox might only spend a few minutes a day on it, but it does it every single day, and it's part of its sort of behavioral repertoire. So that's a very sort of important behavior for that animal. And if the enrichment device also happens to be simple to get it, that's just a bonus.
No, oh, definitely. I would love to see that. I've still never actually seen a muskox in the flesh. So yeah, that would be an impressive sight to see, I bet. And yeah, we've had similar discussions with certain groups with those kind of sparring type behaviors with kind of deer during rut and that kind of thing. It's really fascinating because yes, it is motivated, but how can we ensure that it's done safely? And has that
Mm.
barrel survived all of those years with that muskox?
I think they've had to change the barrels a couple times, but luckily barrels are easy to get. But yeah, I've done sparring devices with like elk and reindeer and caribou with the antlers and stuff, and those are a little harder. I find I've had mixed success with that. I think something important to mention with the natural history is like we're also the most important thing here is like that you're making these things for your individual animal, so you might have individuals that when you're because you're building this item for you're not just building this item for muskox in general. You're building the item for the muskox that you're working with, so there could be a lot of variety there, and you're gonna have to try things, and one animal might be more motivated than another to perform these species specific behaviors, and that's just something that you're going to have to like sort of trial and error, and see what happens. How do I design something that promotes one of these highly motivated behaviors? Is one of those things that people get hung up on, and I think that I think what tends to happen in my experience is we have this behavior, we have this goal in mind for this item, and then we sort of tend to 10x this item, and then it turns into this big thing that we can't achieve. And again, these ideas in your head, this big grand idea, um, isn't enriching unless you can get it to the animal. So I like to talk about this thing, from business called a minimum viable product. I sort of repurposed it into minimum viable antecedent for the animal because you're going to sit down, come up with a design, and then what I think is one of the most useful exercises to actually accomplishing getting this enrichment item built is taking a step back and saying, like, is there an easier way to do this? Like, what is the easiest thing that I can build or give to this animal that might promote a similar or the same behavior? What's the minimum antecedent this animal needs from this item in order to perform this behavior? And you know, that's not always easy to do, but it's something that you can keep sort of iterating on, and maybe if you sit down and you design an item, pass it to the next person and say, hey, is there an easier way you can think about doing this same thing? um I worked with polar bears for a long time, and I always had this like grand idea in my head um about replicating this sort of like pouncing behavior. It's a very highly motivated behavior for a lot of bear species, but polar bears in particular, to like break ice and get food. And I had this big idea where there was going to be this big metal pad that the animal can press on, and then it's going to like shoot food up or something and reward them in some way. And then, one of the keepers I was working with at the time was like, hey, we have an old tractor tire over here. What if we just like put some fire hose over top? Do you think they would pounce on it? And then, sure enough, it went from my, probably $40,000 multi-departments enrichment device. We gave this tractor tire to the bears, and they pounced on it like crazy. So that's an example of taking a an idea that's maybe achievable um, once you have this proof of concept, but like that was never going to happen, to something that these are just materials that you have laying around. So this is, to me, the most important thing to talk about when we're talking about designing is like think about the easiest way, the simplest way to accomplish the same goal, because that getting that thing to the animal, and that's where you're going to see those individual things come out in the animal. The last thing, we've all been there where we get like super hyped about an enrichment item. We spend a week building it. We give it to the animal, and they go like, "What's this?" Right?
Yeah.
I don't
Uh,
want to do
it
this.
it hurts every time, doesn't it?
It does. So, avoiding that and trying to test the concept here is a very useful step and can save you not only heartache but also time and can get more items to the animals, which is what we're looking for.
Okay, so what is the simplest yet most effective enrichment device that you think you've ever built?
I think there's a lot of like I think maybe uh, containers with holes in them can be one of the most sort of ubiquitous enrichment items at any zoo, whether it's a ball with a hole in it, whether it's a bottle with a hole in it, a jug with a hole in it. I think that's a very attainable way of doing anything from object manipulation to like almost like a puzzle to some animals, to extending foraging time, grazing time, like all these kind of things. So I think there's lots of more complicated devices that achieve the same goal, but I think taking a large plastic jug and drilling a hole in it can accomplish a lot of behaviors and is very cheap, easy to replace and replicatable. So that's an example of something that probably everybody has on hand and can use for a variety of animals.
Yeah, no, I've certainly used that in the past as well. All right, so moving on to safety concerns. Now, this is the one that always trips me up because I don't know about you, Kyle, but whenever I am thinking of enrichment or teaching about enrichment, I get caught up on safety concerns. And the more I think about them, the more I see them until every single enrichment item is a potential death trap. Now, obviously, we know that that's not the case, but do you find that and how do you get around that when we are thinking about our safety concerns?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think the thing to think about with safety concerns is acceptable risk,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of great enrichment is going to have a certain amount of risk. I've worked with a lot of like carnivores and big cats, and a lot of these the most sort of impactful enrichment that you can give them are things like feed poles, are things like zip lines, are things that you're really sort of like pushing their athleticism. And with stuff like that, you're gonna again want to think about the individual animal. If you have a geriatric tiger that doesn't have a particularly complex exhibit, and you give them a feed pole and expect them to run up a 15-foot feed pole or something like that, that's very risky for that animal. If you have a juvenile tiger that's athletic, it's done this kind of stuff before. To me, getting them to run up a 10-foot feed pole is within that sort of realm of acceptable risk. And I think there's a lot of examples of acceptable risk. Um, and I think there is like unacceptable risk, things like where the animal can get like entrapment. Those are like that's probably the biggest unacceptable risk. You want to make sure like holes and any potential like nooses if you're hanging things, all these things, like you want to make sure that through regular use the animal is not going to hurt itself based on a design flaw. Yeah, but again, I think depending on the animal that you're working with, I think there's always going to be an acceptable risk, and that's something that you want to have an understanding within your sort of team and within sort of the organization that you're working for. Is like, what does this acceptable risk look like? Is everybody comfortable with this acceptable risk? And are there any further steps we can take to mitigate that risk? But I think, yeah, there's always going to be a certain amount of risk involved, and in habitats that are built with behavior in mind, I think that's going to be the case as well. So this is always something that's going to be, something that we should talk about and something that we should all be aware of.
And do you think that we all as a community need to get more comfortable with sharing when things actually potentially go wrong with designs, as well as obviously where we're really happy to share and inspire each other with things that go right. But do you think that we should also be sharing sometimes the mistakes that we've made and some of the issues that we've encountered?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should because these are as well. Like this is where the individual comes into play here as well because there are times when things don't go well, but if especially if you have multiple animals, shutting something down because it didn't go well for one animal uh, isn't necessarily the way that we should do things. Or if a mistake happens, X amount of years ago, and then you're still not doing something, like these are things that you constantly need to talk about and evaluate because it's also not fair for the animals if you know someone ran that geriatric tiger up a feed pole and then it got hurt and then you're taking that away from younger animals. It's not yeah, it's something that you constantly need to think about and yeah, share with the community because everybody can learn. Maybe they're doing something that there's a small tweak to that makes it a lot safer. So, and that's something they can learn from another institution as opposed to an animal potentially getting hurt. I think it's yeah, super important to share.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think I've learned so much about how to make things right by assessing when things have gone wrong. So for
Mm,
me, I once made a rustic raft for a couple of giant river otters I was working with. And yeah, I just forgot to sand down the edges. And yeah, we ended up with just a small injury in the webbing of the foot. And yeah, not a problem. We could treat it and everything was fine in the end. But again, it's just those really simple little steps that even after you've built it, there's other safety elements. Even if you've got all the right materials and you've got all the behavioral goals in mind, and maybe it's even something that they've encountered before, there's still always those risks. And as you say, whether it's that acceptable risk or not. All right, so moving on to building the enrichment device itself. Now, one thing that we encounter, because obviously we are working around the world, is the availability of materials. Now, I don't know about you, Carl, but do you end up being a bit like a magpie? Because I certainly do.
mm.
You just pick up whatever you can find and see what you can create out of it. And often we have to do that where we're working because we don't have the availability of much apart from bamboo. Bamboo is everywhere for us. We do work a lot
Mm.
in Asia, obviously, so we're able to utilize that. But what are some of the kind of materials that you find are very universally able to be used?
Yeah, I definitely am gonna approach this from a North American bias because that's where I've done most of my work. But I think the materials are gonna vary by institution. But I think a point that I'd really like to highlight here is a lot of surrounding uh, companies and communities, like they would be very very excited to work with the zoo. So I think if you are searching for materials and you don't have the budget for materials, especially reaching out to people that you can collaborate with and reaching out to other teams around your facility, um, around the community. You can find all sorts of things, like if you reach out to a water utility or like the township, the council or whatever, to get some PVC pipe. They probably have stacks of PVC pipe that they're throwing away, and I guarantee they will be absolutely thrilled to give some PVC pipe uh, to benefit an otter or something like that, to build an enrichment device for an otter. So reaching out to collaborators, sending them videos, inviting them to go see, inviting them to help build it. These are all things that you can really do to in order to like stretch these budgets. in order to get more materials, in order to really benefit the animals at the end of the day. So yeah, I think what you have on hand is going to vary a lot, but looking for stuff that you're getting rid of as a company, as an institution, and how you can sort of repurpose them, and getting people in other departments to know what to look for, to know. So, hey, I think Kyle could probably do something with that. Let's set it aside for him. Like those kind of things, I think is really when you start amassing a lot of material that you can really use.
Okay, so moving on to introductions, so creating an introduction plan and when you actually introduce, have you ever had a situation where it went wrong or where it went really right and it went absolutely according to the plan that you'd so carefully put together?
Yeah, I think this is very important when you're working with protected contact species or animals that you can't go in with. I think if you are giving a new enrichment item to a goat, where you can just if it's not going well, or if, there's a that plastic jug is stuck on the animal's horn, you can go in there and you can take it off, and no harm, no foul, and it's fine.
It depends on the
Um,
goat, but yeah.
it does depend on the goat.
I've
Yes.
worked with some scary goats.
Yes. If you're talking about a ram or something like that, especially, then, that might also be a bad time. But, um, yeah, if you are talking about, giving an item to like a tiger, like we were talking about earlier, a bear or something like that, you really have to think about, as we talked about before, like with safety. When you're building this item, you really have to think about, uh, you know, take the extra time to think about the safety, to think about the things that can go wrong, and maybe when you are thinking about the simplest way to do something, maybe there's phases that you can break this into. um, I've built enrichment items that are sort of more complex, and I've given them components to see how they hold up. If you are giving them, if you have a plastic item or something like that, like a jug or something like that, you can give them the jug and see if how that holds up, see if there's any concerns there before taking that item and making it more complex. So testing individual components. I think it's going to depend a lot on the individual. Like, do they have a reliable like emergency recall or something like that? Like, if you're like, we should probably like reset this or something, or can you do it in a holding, or can you do it in an area where you have a little bit more control? Um, I think that's the most important, to think about anything that can go wrong. When you're dealing with powerful, large, potentially dangerous animals. Um, Small parts, things that are breakable. If it can break, it's probably going to, whether or not it's in front of you when you give it to the animal, or it's a year later. So really taking the time to think about safety concerns, to think about the materials that you're using to build. Um, if you're innovating or using materials that you haven't used before, figure out a way to test them, figure out a way to put your mind at ease when you're giving the whole device with these kind of things. So yeah, really taking the extra time is super important here.
Yeah, and I think being appreciative of just how powerful those animals can be. I know that we ran a training workshop in Malaysia, and we had a big discussion about the size of rope that we had available to hang up an enrichment device for some rhinos, and yeah, that ended up snapping. So yeah, there's all of those kind of considerations of how powerful this individual is, as well as yeah, the species as a whole. But Kyle,
Mm-hmm.
how do you find that you manage expectations? So going back to, you've worked hard on this device, you put it in, the animal could not care less about it, or maybe even is scared of it. We obviously know that there's a lot of neophobia. in certain individuals. So how do you kind of manage those expectations, particularly maybe if someone hasn't done a lot of enrichment building before? Because we work with people who they maybe have done some enrichment, but they're always really excited to put the stuff in, which is great. And then obviously we sometimes don't always see a reaction, or we might even see a negative one. So how do you find yourself managing those kind of expectations from the people building the devices?
Yeah, it's a great point. As we talked about before, more often than not, you're going to be disappointed in this process. It's just the way these animals don't come with sort of instruction manuals on how to give them enrichment. So
Oh, if only they
um,
did.
if if only they did, yes. So I think that is one of the reasons why I built the enrichment roadmap is like you can sort of see this as a full process and introducing monitors on here as step 7 of 9. That's just you're not done yet when you give the item to the animal, and no matter what happens, there's still steps that come afterwards. You have the opportunity to reevaluate and see what happens is really what you are doing when you give an animal an enrichment device or a new experience. You're looking at what that is for them, and it is an experience. Like that's um, an opportunity for you to learn, an opportunity for you to gather information that's going to make your enrichment program better. So when you fail, I encourage people to figure out why you failed, figure out what to change. And that's really where I think thinking about the easiest way to do this, that minimum viable antecedent is also really important because you can sort of test all of these individual parts and all of these components of an enrichment device so that when you're at this final product that you're happy with, that you spent a ton of time on, what the animal's going to do, because you've tested it, you've iterated on it, you've reevaluated it. That's the real opportunity for you to make it better. And if you fail, um, that's not a failure in my mind. It's just an opportunity to sort of learn the preferences of the animal because assuming they're going to know what to do with everything we give them is not fair to them. So really, yeah, taking it as a learning opportunity, thinking about it. Um, when it comes to things like neophobia, I think it's important to think about it as a training opportunity for that animal too. Is like, if you're working with individuals that have potentially come from more barren environments, that they might have backgrounds that aren't conducive with a lot of these natural behaviors. Like a lot of them are highly motivated. They're in their brain, whether they know it or not. But I think using those as a training opportunity. What do you what can you do in order to show this animal like how to use this item or how to perform this behavior, and also when it comes to things like to reptiles, to some like birds, especially like raptors and stuff like that. What do you actually think this animal is going to do? Like that's why it's so important. One of the earlier steps is establishing a goal or behavior, which we talked about, is like is very important because you should discuss as a group. Is like what does a red tail hawk interacting with this enrichment item look like? Because it's not going to look the same as you giving a grizzly bear something new. It's just not. Or like especially reptiles and what's me giving this this uh, crocodile or this boa constrictor. Like what does it interacting with this item actually look like? Because understanding that um, is going to really help you. You waiting for a snake to do a backflip when you give it a new enrichment item. If you're waiting for that, like you're going to be disappointed. Whereas like maybe you're setting up cameras to see what it does throughout the day with this item. Tempering your expectations, having realistic goals is and figuring out that minimum viable antecedent is really going to help you ensure success. But keeping in mind It's just an opportunity to learn and just an opportunity to reevaluate and get something better.
There's our favorite word again, opportunity. Okay, so once it's gone in, and hopefully the animals had this brilliant experience and had the opportunity to create all of these motivated behaviors, then the next step for us is to reevaluate and implement any changes. So, have you had any instances where you've had to reevaluate and say, okay, this isn't working, or actually the whole thing needs to go right back to the beginning and start again for this goal behavior? Have you ever had that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first big enrichment items I ever built, and still just this is hard for me to even talk about, Sarah, because it was such a time investment. I worked with otters, probably over 10 years ago now, and one of the things the facility that I worked at actually worked with a water utility quite a bit. So we got these massive PVC pipes from them that they were doing a construction project near, and they were like, "Here's these massive PVC pipes," and we were super excited, and we wanted to build a water slide for the otters, and we had thousands and thousands of dollars worth of PVC. We built this like brilliant slide that goes all the way through their exhibit, and like we were beyond excited about this. Um, and we took weeks setting this thing up and getting it going. We used thousands of dollars of PVC. We had this water utility come out to like watch the otters get this slide. And when I tell you the otters did not even want to go anywhere near the slide, um, they did not want to interact with it at all. And this is probably an instance of neophobia. I don't know why we thought putting a bright blue in 40% of their exhibit was a good idea, but we did. And um, I think we tried to sort of train the otters to use it. We put food halfway up the slide. We tried to get them to go like the other way up the slide. um, and I think we reevaluated to the point of saying like the current design we have is just not going to work. And we took all of the slide pieces out. We ended up simplifying it to smaller sections of pipe that were sort of sitting there. It worked, sort of well in the winter. They were able to like have a sort of like ice cavity through the PVC and use it a little bit. But I think what we were expecting of the otters was very unrealistic for them. Otters, they don't slide long distances. They're sliding sort of like, if anybody's ever seen them move around on the ice, they sort of like they get a little bit of run, they slide for a couple feet, they get a little bit of run, they slide for a couple feet. That's sort of how they move. They're not going to be luging down a course. So I think we were starting from an unrealistic expectation, and we had to massively scale it back. If we had the enrichment roadmap at the time, um, I think we would have been able to start from a much simpler place. We would have been able to put 6 feet of pipe down to see what they did, as opposed to starting with the what the finished product might have looked like. So yeah, that was an example of we really had to completely scale it back to that minimum viable antecedent, and that's sort of where it ended up remaining.
I think it's important to have these therapy sessions about enrichment that don't go according to plan. I think we've all got a story like that, although that sounds pretty epic in its scale, definitely.
Yes, the scale of failure was quite large on that, but we learned a lot.
Just
We
the
learned a
not
lot.
even failure, but just the scale of the size of this thing as well. But
Yeah, it was very large.
I do feel like a lot of people they give animals that kind of human attribute of, oh well, we enjoy a slide, so the animals will as
Mhm.
well, kind of thing. And obviously it's coming from that idea of they do slide along the ice for a few feet as that goal behavior, and then we kind of humanize it almost, don't we?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's certainly something that I've been guilty of in the past as well, but it's very easily done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then our final step, we have arrived at the end of the process. So evaluate and add to rota. So tell me what you think about enrichment rotas, Carl, because I know that there's a lot of discussion at the moment as to whether these themselves, having a rota, can actually be a little bit restrictive, depending on how you use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think evaluation is something that takes place over the long term, and I think there's a lot of people that look at their enrichment sort of storage area and they feel like a little bored with it. And if you're bored of it, the animal's probably bored of it as well. So I think there's rotating the enrichment devices, day to day, and then there's rotating the enrichment devices, long term. Because I think there's a lot of people focusing on rotating them day to day and not necessarily long term. And I think long term is really where you're going to see the differences for the animals because um, I don't get too hung up on just changing enrichment devices day to day. As far as the day to day rotation of them, it's not something that I think is as important as people think it is. Because I think when you're looking again, step two is that goal. If every enrichment item that you have should have a goal, and I think when you group them together by goal, and I encourage anybody that's listening to do this. Take all of your enrichment items, put them on the ground, group them by goal. You will find that your goals for each enrichment item are very similar. And I think when you are rotating especially every single day, when you're rotating between enrichment items with the same goal, uh, how much different is that experience for the animal? Because I think if you are switching between a jug with a hole in it to a ball with a hole in it, the enrichment experience for that animal is very very similar. Um, so I don't necessarily think it's as impactful as people think. I think the if the experience is very similar for the animal, that's not something we need to think about. But I think we need to think about their behavioral repertoire as a whole. What should this animal be doing? Like, what's this time budget look like? Day to day, week to week, year to year, and how can we sort of tailor this enrichment program to be holistic in that regard. Because getting them to do the same thing with different devices is going to be less impactful than thinking about the whole behavioral repertoire and getting them to do different things with different devices. And if that means, just, refilling items and not necessarily changing them in order to get time to make the program more complex, I think that's going to have a bigger impact on the animal. Um, and when I'm talking about long-term rotations, I think it's important to look at evaluate these enrichment experiences, and if the animal's getting bored of this item, it's not using it, it's not eliciting the same behaviors, it's not achieving the goal. Don't be afraid to take it out, put it back in 6 months later, put it back in a year later. I think people don't focus on that enough, and there's a lot of enrichment items that are used for way too long that maybe we need to switch the goals of this program and switch the behaviors that we're really targeting. But that starts with tracking these things, looking at these, evaluating all these kind of things. So yeah, I think that's sort of where I sit in the whole like rotation of enrichment devices.
And I think as well, it's very easy to focus on just the feeding element of that, isn't it? It's probably the easiest
Oh yeah.
enrichment goal that we have is those feeding type behaviors. And we forget that there are four other categories of enrichment that we can really focus on and we should be focusing on probably more so than the feeding. But one thing that I love to do is talk about that kind of ratcheting up of the challenge. So, you've got the initial device and maybe they
Mm.
figure it out and it becomes quite easy for them. And then you can make it slightly more difficult, reintroduce it again, and then you keep kind of stepping up that challenge to so you don't have to throw away the device as such, but you can keep introducing additional challenges to that initial goal behavior to encourage more of it, I guess.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to note, especially when we're at the step of building the item or designing the item, is thinking about like, is this item like easy to make more challenging for the animal, or like is it easy to like sort of iterate on? Because I think that's an important thing when designing is yeah, like can we continuously challenge the animal with this item, and is there ways we can combine it with other experiences, with other items, in order to yeah make it more challenging and make it continuously novel sort of over the long term is really really important.
Yeah, definitely. So, what are your next hopes and dreams for the enrichment roadmap? Where do you want us to take it next?
I mean, it's already surpassed what I thought was capable, but I think if it's able to continue to help people design enrichment items to enrich the lives of the animals they're working with, I think that's I would love for it to continuously be that resource, and in order to really help keepers. If it continues to help keepers, yeah, I would be over the moon with that result for sure.
I think that's pretty much guaranteed, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Yeah, we've certainly got big plans for it next year. We've got all sorts of projects that can definitely utilize it across parts of Asia, across parts of other places as well. So it's definitely going to be very heavily utilized.
Yeah, and I'm always trying to think of especially this sort of like infographic, and I'm always trying to build sort of like hands-on things for keepers. So um, yeah, finding more opportunity to do that is definitely something I'm interested in, and something that I'm constantly thinking about. So yeah,
That's your own enrichment process.
yeah, it sure is.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Carl, for joining us to talk through the enrichment roadmap that we've got, and probably still one of our most successful resources. So, where can people find out more about Wild Enrichment, and where can they find the roadmap?
Yeah, so they can find Wild Enrichment at wildenrichment.com. I'm on most of the social media. I'm also not very active on them, but Wild Enrichment on most of them. If people want to chat or drop me a line or anything like that, they can do that at Kyle at wildenrichment.com. If at the end of this, for some reason, you want to listen to more of me, you can do that at the Wild Enrichment podcast, which is on every sort of podcast platform. They can find all the resources there as well, including episode with Sarah as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can't remember the episode number, but it's on there. So yeah,
Great. And if people want to find the translated version of the roadmap, we can also log on to wildwelfare.org, and under our What is Animal Enrichment section, there's all sorts of different things on there regarding enrichment. We've got inspiration, we talk about the enrichment categories, and of course, we've got all 22 of the translations of our beloved enrichment roadmap. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Kyle, and I'm sure it won't be the end of our collaboration.
yeah. Thank you again for having me, and thank you for all that you guys have done with the Enrichment Roadmap. It's been fantastic to be a part of. So thank you again.